Hello and welcome to the Great Revel. I'm your host Bosseidon, and this is officially the first episode of the podcast. And what better way to start than Modern Horizons 2? So this past week, we had the first spoilers, and I think it's fitting to talk about Modern Horizons 2 today. Because spoilers are starting next week. So I want to analyze the ones that we already have. First of all, we have Fetchlands being reprinted, and I have to say I've seen a lot of people wondering if we'd get the rest of the Canopy cycle. So in Modern Horizons 1, we got a Horizon Canopy half cycle. Of the, I think it's enemy colors. So Boros, Orzhov, Simic, Izzet, and Golgari. And those have their uses, but these colors are typically more, I don't know, they aren't the colors of aggression. Sure, the Boros one, the red ones essentially I've seen tons of play, but Boros and Izzet are hardly the common aggro colors. So people are kind of expecting that the red, green, and red, black Canopy lands will have a strong impact in the format, but those aren't coming in this set. Because with Fetchlands coming, I doubt that they would print two rare cycles in the same set. So that's that. Maybe Modern Horizons 3. But Fetchlands are getting reprinted. That's the big takeaway here, and I think that's very good. They come with their original art, which it's cool. It's cool. I don't like Arid Mesa's art, but the other four are okay. But they also come in a special treatment of Old Border, and those are gonna be hella expensive. Which is cool. I love that they've been making premium versions of every card. Because that usually means the normal version isn't really that expensive. Just because there are more in circulation, right? Like there are more slots they can come in, and people that want pretty ones will gravitate towards the different ones. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Not much to say. Like we know what Fetchlands are. So let's actually look at new cards, and I'm gonna start with the ones that I don't think are as interesting. So I'm gonna start with the artifacts. So the first one is an homage to Lead's Eye Diamond, the classic legacy card, probably vintage as well. But this one is a artifact creature, costs 2, and it taps for the same effect as Lion's Eye Diamond. It's called Diamond Lion, which is quite fitting. Personally, I don't think this card will make much of an impact, although like adding 3 mana could be very relevant here, but like the effect of discarding your hand, I don't think it's that wanted, at least in Modern. Even in other formats, right? Like discarding your whole hand is typically not that great. Even in decks that want to discard their hand, I don't think that discarding your whole hand is that amazing. But who knows? Maybe this makes Infernal Tutor something to fear. Like maybe a combo deck comes from this, but I don't know. The fact that this can only come down on turn 2 and can only tap on turn 3 makes me think this is a tad too slow. Because it's a combo piece that dies to common removal. I think that's the big issue I have with this. Like similar to how Storm loses to creature removal, and that's why Storm, like Gift Storm, hasn't really picked up too much steam in the format. I think this will be the same thing. And speaking of homages, we also have Brainstone, a 1 mana artifact, which for 2 mana and you tap it and sacrifice it, you brainstorm. This one, I'm not sure if this one will be like playable. Like maybe mid-range decks. Like I can imagine Eldrazi playing this. Yeah, I can imagine Eldrazi playing this. Like, it's such a strong effect, especially because they have expedition maps to shuffle. They have the Maze Mine Tome to put cards on bottom with the Scry. So maybe this sees playing Eldrazi, and there's also combos with lures, right? You get to, for 3 mana, you get to brainstorm every turn. So you get to play companion lures, and this could be an interesting thing for a control deck. Not sure if it will be that strong, but we also thought that about other cheap cards. But the 2 mana cost to actually brainstorm seems a bit too much for this type of effect. But being colorless might mean that it's weird to play somewhere else. Then we have a very interesting card called Urza Saga, and this is quite the new one. It's an enchantment land, and it's a saga. First chapter, this saga, like this card gains tap to add a colorless mana. So the turn it comes down, it's an untapped colorless source. The second chapter lets you pay 2 and tap it to make a construct, which might seem weird because you can't do this on curve. Like you can't play Urza Saga on 1 and do this on turn 2 because you do have to tap it. But this does mean that the late game Urza Saga still has quite a bit of value. And also, if you copy it with like a Thespian stage and then copy some other land before it pops its chapter 3 and dies. Yeah, because this is a saga, so it's a land that eventually dies. That's relevant. But if you copy it and then uncopy it, these abilities, the mana ability and the construct ability, are permanent, which means that it's a land that poops out constructs for 2. 3 if you count itself. And that can be quite powerful. Like I can imagine a deck maybe has this shoehorned in, or maybe it's built around this synergy, but it does look like a cool interaction. We all know that Thespian stage can be quite good from Legacy Dark Depths, so maybe there's something here. And then the last chapter, you get to search your library for an artifact card with mana cost 0 or 1 and put it on the battlefield. So that's quite powerful, but do note that the card does say mana cost 0 or 1. It doesn't say mana value, or as boomers would say, converted mana cost, which means you can't fetch things that don't have mana cost or cost X, like Mox Tanalite or Walking Ballista if you want one in the grave for some reason. So or Lotus Bloom, that would be a problem if this could fetch Lotus Bloom, but it can't. Only mana cost 0 or 1. Do note that because sagas work, they trigger at the beginning of your main phase, of your first main phase, which means that when this triggers to crack to fetch an artifact, you can tap it for mana. You can tap it for mana that turn. And because of that, and I've spoken to someone that plays Amulet religiously, and he has tested it, and he says that the card is really good there. Because if you open with this, you're essentially playing 8 copies of Amulet, right? If you open with this, you have Amulet on 3, and with 8 copies of Amulet, I think that having 2 on the battlefield could be quite big. This also pairs really well with Arboreal Grazer, because if you play an untapped green source, you play Grazer, you put this on the battlefield, so you're still guaranteeing Amulet on 3. So that could be quite powerful. So I do think that this card will immediately be included in Amulet Titan. I also think that this card might see some play in Hammer Time because it does two relevant things for the deck. One, it makes creatures, which the deck needs to hold hammers, and two, it tutors hammers and other toolbox pieces that the deck might have. So I think that's quite powerful, and the deck might actually end up playing, maybe not all four, because making colorless mana and dying could be relevant there, but they might play a couple as like a filler slot. You know, sometimes decks like to play these type of cards in non-land slots, because you kind of always guarantee that you find lands, but also you have, like, they have use if you're flooding. That's why canopies are so good in aggressive decks, because you get to up your land count a little bit, so you never flood. You never screw. You flood a little bit more, but since some of your lands are essentially cantrips, you get to get back into the game. So I do think that Urza Saga will see a good amount of play. And then we have the probably the biggest spoiler from Modern Horizons 2, which is Counterspell. So Counterspell is coming to Modern, and okay, a couple of things. First of all, I think that Counterspell right now is fine. Like, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, which was when I started playing, I might have said, oh wow, no, Counterspell is way too good. Maybe because back then I was bad at Magic, but honestly, Counterspell is fine. Like, Counterspell will replace Mana Leak, and that's about it. You'll have a ton of decks that play, like, instead of playing like 2 or 3 Mana Leaks, they'll just play 4 Counterspells, like the one of Logic Knot that they also played. I do think that it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad that now, if you want to build control, like the early interaction isn't, like, you don't really need to put much thought into it, right? You just slam 4 counterspells, slam like 3 or 4 Archmage's Charm, 3 or 4 cryptic commands, and you're good to go, essentially. So I do think that this homogenizes control decks a little bit, which I don't know. It's kind of sad, but it's also good for them, so that's cool, I guess. Please do note that this probably won't have that much of an impact in the format. I've seen people like losing their minds, saying that the card is really strong and it's going to change the format forever. I don't think so. And this might age like milk out in the sun, but I don't think that this card will change the format too much. Yeah, sure, like big mana can't really play around Mana Leak anymore, but that's good. I honestly think that big mana gets away with too much. Like the Tron variants and Amulet Titan get away with too much because they're fast and they can play interactive, so aggro decks don't have an easy time against them. And because of the huge amounts of mana that they made, they could play around some counter spells against control that was relevant, and now they can't. Like, I know that a big problematic line against Tron from the control side was when they had Tron and they downticked and they played a Karn, the 4-mana Karn from War of the Spark, and you can't Mana Leak that. So in games where the control player was on the draw, unless you have Force of Negation, you couldn't interact with that Karn, because if you cast Mana Leak, they'll just pay for it. But not anymore. You just eat a counterspell. I don't think that the mana cost will be too much of a downgrade. Like, control decks were already playing Archmage's Charm, so the mana has been made to work. So I don't think that counterspell will have too much of an impact there. It might have impact in the burn matchup. So Mana Leak against Burn was pretty much always a counterspell. But this means now the control decks can't fetch a basic to push you turn 1, or they turn off their counterspell on turn 2. So I think that might end up being favorable for us as Burn players. But overall, I don't think that the spell will change the format that much. It's also being printed at Uncommon, which I think is quite cool. Counterspell absolutely spiked in price with the announcement, especially like premium versions, like the Archive Counterspell, the Japanese one, shot up to like €100 in foil, of course. It's about 85-90 euro now, which I think is bonkers, but also fine, because then again, remember, you have the Mystical Archive normal version, not being foil costs €2. So there it is. Your staple in a somewhat premium version is almost bulk. See, and this is what I meant earlier when I said that I like cards having tons of versions, because they can't all be super expensive, so you'll have some cheaper. And if you have cheap versions that are cool, it's an easy way to make your deck prettier. That's it for spoilers for Modern Horizons 2. And I know that people are really scared of Modern Horizons 2. Because I know why, but I don't really get how people can be this thick. Not the good kind of thick. Not Resident Evil 8 big titted goth girlfriend mommy thick. Just, not the brightest people. People just hate on Modern Horizons 1 way too much. Way too much. People say that it absolutely destroyed Modern. It was a bad set. It was just a train wreck. But if you look at the set, it actually gave Modern tons of good toys that people definitely love. So if let's talk about the obvious ones that people didn't like. Hogak. People talk as if Hogak was broken from like day zero. Like they spoiled Hogak and everyone was instantly on it saying, oh, this is gonna break Modern. What? Like, this is obviously broken. That really wasn't the case. I remember I was already playing Modern back then, and I remember when I saw it, like, first of all, and I know it's not a good metric because, there are a lot of people that comment on cards without really playing the format. But I remember commenting this with a friend, and he played Dredge back then. And I remember seeing Hogak and telling him, oh, this might be cool. It's a bit overcosted, because, like, actually paying that cost before, like, turn 4, maybe 3, seems quite hard. And, like, it gets got by Path pretty hard. And back then, Path was really popular. And I don't know, I might see play, like, as a one-off in Dredge because it's something cool to do. Remember that back then, Ox of Agonas wasn't a card yet. So this seemed like a cool way to use your blood gas to cast something bigger. Like the trample was really cool. And I do have proof that this card wasn't like speculated to be as broken as it was, because on release it was like bulk cheap. Right? That's typically the sign. Like Force of Negation, people knew instantly that it would be a format staple. So that card came out already super expensive for a rare, of course. Maybe not so because it's a rare of a premium set, but kind of expensive for a rare card. Hogak came out as bulk. It spiked a little bit when people found out that it could play the Altar combo with Bridge from Below. But it never really spiked super hard because it got banned quite fast. And this is also something that I hear people talk about it as if it wasn't the case, but the combo of Altar, Bridge, and Hogak was banned really fast. It was like less than a month. Like Modern Horizons 1 came out, and less than a month from there, Bridge was banned. So yeah, they didn't take too much time. And back then, ban announcements were still scheduled. They were still scheduled, and they immediately got on it. So I don't get why people panic too much. Maybe because, I don't know. I don't really know. Because even back then, like, things were open. Like, we didn't have coronavirus fucking everything up. So things like stores were open. So people were playing not as much because they weren't stuck home to play all day. So I don't really get how people were complaining that much about this combo. And then they banned Bridge from Below, which honestly I do think it was the correct ban. I heard a lot of people complaining about this ban, saying, oh, of course they wouldn't ban their new prize card. And like, okay, first of all, Hogak was never a chase rare. Not really. It was a mildly cool rare to pull because it's how play. And here's what's worse, because we all know that after the Bridge from Below ban, Hogak kept being a force in Modern, to the point where it itself got banned. However, the card was never really super expensive, so mostly because people assumed it would get banned, right? I think that was the whole gist of it. Like, people were assuming that the card would get banned, so nobody really bought tons of it to scalp, or like not a lot of people were getting in on the hype train because they were assuming it was going to get banned. But the card was never really a chase rare. So anyone that says, oh, they didn't ban Hogak because it was a chase rare, go outside and sniff some grass. That wasn't what happened. But I do agree with the Bridge from Below ban, because here's the deal. You have a 3-card combo with Hogak, Bridge from Below, and Altar of Dementia. And the special thing about this 3-card combo, because 3-card combos are usually bad, but the thing about this one is that you only had to draw and cast one of those pieces, or at least draw and cast from hand one of those pieces, because Hogak was quote-unquote free, so you only really had to cast one of those pieces. And so the combo was really a 1-card combo, that's why it was problematic. But here's the deal. I genuinely think, and you can hate me on this. I genuinely think that Hogak is an interesting card. Okay, maybe it was too cheap. Like, maybe what's this, 7 mana cost? Maybe that was too cheap, because apparently people can pay that on turn 2 somewhat consistently. And maybe that was too much. Maybe the stats were a bit too much. Like 8/8 is unbeatably big in the format. Maybe the trample was too much. Like maybe some other form of evasion. Maybe menace would have been more. Maybe menace would have been less menacing. But I do think that the card is very interesting. It's a card that you can spend mana to cast. Like, it's quite restrictive. I do think that it was a numbers issue and not a concept issue, which I think is very important. I think that when Wizards make cards that they end up being too strong because of numbers, I think that's pretty excusable, right? They're like, this set they were trying to innovate, and I think they managed to innovate a ton, because there are a ton of cards in Modern Horizons 1 that are really interesting, and Hogak is one of them. Numbers wise, okay. Like, hindsight 2020, it was too cheap / too big / too good of an evasion type. But I do think that the card was quite interesting, and I do think that them giving it a chance to be played outside of that degenerate combo was a good decision. Altar of Dementia, not as interesting as a card, but it's still an okay card to exist. Like, I don't know, I can maybe see a deck that would want Altar of Dementia to play it in a somewhat fair way. So the card is somewhat interesting. Unlike Bridge from Below. Like, Bridge from Below is one of those cards that I think that it should be, like, if it poses a problem, it should be banned and people shouldn't look back on it. Because Bridge from Below does nothing as a normal Magic card. You need it in a graveyard. And it's one of those cards that's either unplayably bad, like you cannot play this card in your deck if you want to win, or it's absolutely broken. And when those cards are absolutely broken, like when you have cards that are either unplayable or broken, I think they deserve to be banned, right? Because sure, you ban Hogak, you keep Bridge in, then maybe sometime in the future something else breaks Bridge. And you can't keep banning things because a broken card, like a fundamentally broken card like Bridge, keeps getting broken by other stuff. So I do agree with the Bridge from Below ban. And look, my sympathies go out to you if you enjoyed playing Bridge in a deck that wasn't broken, but come on, let's be real. If the card deserves to be banned. So yeah, that's it about Hogak. I do think that after Bridge from Below was banned, I think that the deck kept being too strong. I also think that people weren't really trying to beat it. Like, Path to Exile was really good against that deck. And I should know because whenever I played against it, I beat it off of Path to Exile. But, like, decks just weren't willing to play Path to Exile. And back then, there wasn't like a Ponza. Like, Ponza wasn't the thing back then. So it's not like you couldn't splash a third color in your deck if you had to, or I don't know. All I know is that people weren't playing exile effects, and it showed. It showed because Hogak became too popular of a deck. Sure, I'm not saying that the deck wouldn't have been too strong if people respected it a bit more. Like I do think that the deck was a bit too strong. So I do agree with the Hogak ban. I also think that people didn't try enough to beat it. Like, they just assumed, oh no, yep, Hogak's gonna get banned, so why even try? So I think that was part of the issue that Hogak was so good, because people weren't willing to beat it. So instead of the deck looking like a strong tier 0, it looked like an obscenely strong tier 0. Like, compare Hogak to the one we had recently, the Valky Cascade decks before the Cascade rule changes. Now, that was a tier 0 unbeatable deck. Like, that deck was just insanely strong, and you had very little ways of playing against it. Partially because it played like the quote-unquote free counter spells that pretty much destroy any hopes of interaction, but also because the deck was just super busted. Let's be real. Yeah, and that's Hogak. That's Hogak. There was another one. There was another card from Modern Horizons 1 that's banned, and that's only 2 cards banned. And I think that's not really a lot, especially in a set where they were purposefully trying to push power levels. Only having 2 cards banned, 2 cards whose power level wasn't apparent even when they were released, like Hogak. It broke fast, sure, but not that fast, and it was banned quite quickly, and it kept being too good. But again, it was a card that, when spoiled, people weren't giving it too much credit, and it was only after people testing it out in shells that people realized it was that good. So yeah, I don't think it was that much of a miss. Arkham's Astrolabe was the other one, a card that people kind of brushed off at the beginning. At least I think. I don't remember how Astrolabe was received in spoiler season and on release. What I do know is that it slowly crept up to the point where 4-color control decks had perfect mana every game, painlessly. I think that's always the problem with too many colors. is if they get to do it painlessly, because then you can't really punish them. Not only was it painlessly, they also could play pretty well around Blood Moon. So you had 3 and 4 color decks whose mana base was painless, and they could play around Blood Moon. So yeah, I do think that was a problem. Astrolabe was the best 1 mana cantrip for a while, simply because it fixed your mana along the way. Yeah, so not much to note on Astrolabe aside from that. Like a 1 mana cantrip that fixes your mana for the rest of the game. Who knew it was too strong? Well, we didn't, because this card exists at 2 mana, and it says 0 play. Precisely because at 2 mana, this isn't good. At 2 mana, this just isn't good. And I think it was pretty interesting for them to print this at 1 mana. Arguably, it was a miss making it a snow mana, a snow artifact, rather, because like this card was not only good on its own, but also because it enabled Ice Fang Quaddle. So maybe a bit of a miss there. Like you're making it a snow artifact when you're printing a strictly better, okay, of course, quote unquote strictly better. What's it called? The blue-black one that's a legacy, or used to be a legacy stable at least. Baleful Strix. You're printing a better Baleful Strix. Of course, quote unquote better, because it's not better. It has conditions, but like if you're giving it tools, if you're giving Snow a 1 mana permanent that's good, then Quaddle is really fucking good. And maybe it being Snow wasn't a downside. I don't think that being Snow was a downside, because for some reason Wizards refuses to print Snow Hate. I was happy when Kaldheim got announced, or not announced. I was happy when Kaldheim got revealed to have snow cards, because I was absolutely sure. I would have bet money on it, honestly, that we were getting some form of Snow Hate, like for every color, and I was kind of hopeful that Red would get a Snow Price of Progress. So. A 2 mana, it could even be a sorcery, but a 2 mana card that Red deals 2 damage to each player times the number of snow permanents they have. Or non-land snow. No. Yeah, snow permanents, because the snow lands need a downside. Or maybe, like a snow boil, destroy every snow permanent, something like that. And you might think, you might think, oh, you're absolutely nuts for asking for that, but let's be real, like Snow needs a down, because if Snow has an actual downside, then Astrolabe isn't a problem, then Quaddle can never be a problem, then they can push Snow into much more interesting places without fearing that it's too strong, or without fearing that Snow has no downside. But they didn't give us any Snow Hate, so yeah. No Snow Hate as of now. I doubt we're coming back to Snow anytime soon in Standard. So Modern Horizons 3, please bring back Snow and give us some good anti-Snow cards. I took a bit of a tangent there. Oh yeah, Arkham's Astrolabe. Maybe the mana cost was an upside instead of a downside. I'd say so. But even then, I think that pushing this to 1 mana instead of 2, because it existed at 2 mana and it wasn't playable. So pushing it to 1 mana and see what it does is an interesting, at least I think that it's fair to say it's an interesting thought experiment. Even though it didn't turn out too well, because the card got banned in Modern and Legacy, I think. Let me check. I think the card's banned in Legacy. Yeah, the card's banned in Legacy as well. Because again, the issue with the card is that it makes mana bases so much better. Seriously, I'm a burn player, and decks having to either play behind tempo because they play tapped lands, or shock themselves, or like fetch a bunch to fix their mana. It's a real cost, and I think that mana bases, like expanding to more colors, should have a cost, at least in Modern. In Legacy, the cost is Wasteland. Because of duals, you aren't paying too much life, so the cost's essentially Wasteland. I don't think that Modern really could handle Wasteland. So I think that there needs to be another downside for running too many colors, and Shocklands provide that pretty darn well. Paying life to have better mana is a fair way to guarantee that you're never too greedy with your mana base. But of course, people still are very greedy. I love that there are 5-color control decks that play a bunch of tapped lands and a bunch of shock lands that then complain about Monastery Swiftspear. That to me is the pinnacle of stupidity. I'm sorry, but if you're playing a 5-color deck with a bunch of fetch, shock, and tapped lands, you cannot be complaining about losing to consistent, essentially monocolored decks. I mean, get your head out of your ass, please. But aside from those 2 banned cards, I think that Modern Horizons was super healthy. I think that the only other card you could complain about, wrongly so, but I think you could complain, is Urza, because the affinity players got super sad that their bad deck lost their broken card, so it got even worse. But I honestly think that Urza was fair. I think that Urza was really fair as a card. It's very okay. I don't mean fair in the typical sense of fair, because it does make mana, but I mean it's a card that's very interesting. It's pretty well costed for its stats. It has an ETB that isn't the strongest ETB. It makes a construct. It gives you mana for every untapped artifact you control. I think that an issue with Urza is that it doesn't get hosted by a Karn the Great Creator, because the mana ability is from Urza, not from the artifact, so you can still tap them. And then you have the Urza quote-unquote ultimate, which, gives you a free cast, but it's not even that abusable because you have to shuffle your library. I think the card's very fair, in terms of power level, at least. I think the card's as an apt power level. What I don't think is that Mox Opal shouldn't have been banned. Come on. Mox Opal is, in a way, a Mox Rainbow, but only for specific decks. You cannot tell me that a card that's comparable to a Power 9, not even a Power 9, like a strictly better Power 9, in some shells, is a healthy card for a format. You cannot tell me that. And sure, again, my heart goes out to you if you love to play Artifact and you love to play Mox Opal, but you could still play Artifacts. Hammer Time is still a deck, in a way. So you could still play an Artifact deck, like an aggro Artifact deck. Or a tiered aggro artifact deck, which I know is what people want. They want their deck to be good. They want their deck to be popular. They want to open Goldfish and see their deck there, which I don't really get, but whatever. As for the rest of the set, I think that the set just then had a fuck ton of interesting cards. What did we get? On Modern Horizons? Like, very quickly, let's just go over what Modern Horizons brought us. Like Ephemerate, Giver of Runes, On Thin Ice, Ranger Captain of Eos. Eos? Yes. What else? Winds of Abandon. Hasn't seen too much play because the Path effect's bad now, but it's still a very interesting card. Archmage's Charm, Force of Negation. Factor Fiction came into Modern Horizons 1, which was short-lived, but still an interesting card. What else do we have? Urza. We have Carrion Feeder. We have Dead of Winter. We have... where is it? Plague Engineer. And fuck you if you think Plague Engineer was bad for the format. The card's very okay. Like, it's power-wise, it's very okay. It's a 3-mana 2/2 that kills 1/1s. If you still have one, like if you're playing a tribal deck that can't get out of losing to Plague Engineer, then maybe your tribal deck isn't well built. Just saying. Slingang Lieutenant was a big one. Unearth, Yawgmoth was a super interesting card. Arya Flame, Firebolt, like so many. Goblin Engineer, Goblin Matron was in Modern Horizons 1. So many interesting cards. Lava Dart and Sinkhole, Pillage. I think Pillage was really good for the format. Like land hate that gets to hate on another specific type of card. Just pushed Panza, like pushed land destruction to be playable again, which I think was quite cool. Seasoned Pyromancer, which in my opinion is like probably the single best red mid-range card. And I think that every mid-range deck that plays red should play a playset of Seasoned Pyromancer. I think that here's a jab at Jund. If you're playing Jund and not playing 4 Seasoned Pyromancer, you're doing it wrong. What else? We have Collector Ooth, like a very interesting card. Hex Drinker. I don't think we have many good green ones. I'm probably missing a few. I'm trying to go fast here. Eladamri's Call, Quaddle, Kaya's Guile, which has blown up recently because, when Shadow was meta, each opponent sacrificing a creature was very relevant. Now that Shadow players have disappeared, this isn't as strong, but people still keep playing it. Ren 6, which I think Ren 6 is a bit overhyped, but whatever. More on that later. And then the Canopy lands, which were really cool. Cycle lands. Were cycle lands in Modern before? No, right? Like the tapped cycle lands. I don't think they were in Modern before this. Yeah, they never came out to Modern. So that was a nice inclusion for some decks. So that's a fuck, and Flusterstorm as the buy box. So that was a fuck ton of good and healthy cards for 2 arguably broken. And I say arguably because they weren't apparently broken like from the get-go. And even then, like, sure, and people will hate me for saying this, but sure, okay, I'll concede that Hogak was very, very broken, but Astrolabe was, like, just slightly broken. Like, it's bannable for sure, but I don't think it's, like, I don't think it's Eye of Ugin levels of broken, if that's understandable. Yeah, I do think that Modern Horizons 1 was a very good set, and I have no clue of what to expect from Modern Horizons 2. I don't think that they will print anything for me as a burn player. I'm still quite excited, like, already. Urza Saga and the artifacts, Brainstone and Diamond Lion, those are 2 very interesting cards. Those are 3 very interesting cards. And, Counterspell, nice quality of life for control, but not anything over the top. So I'm hopeful that this will be as successful as Modern Horizons 1 in bringing cool new cards to the format. All right, I think that's about it for today. I really like Modern Horizons 1. If you disagree with anything I said, please get back to me. But I think that everything that I said was quite fair. And if you really look at it objectively, without feelings for having to play against Ogak for a while or having Astrolabe in the format being annoying, I think that you will agree that the set was quite good. Like so many. Oh, I forgot Force of Vigor. I just saw it. I was scrolling past green cards. I saw Force of Vigor. Another very interesting card to bring to the format. Like, I think that the Force cycle in Modern Horizons 1 was a miss because you have the blue one, which is amazing. You have the green one, which is, it's a bit niche, but very good. And then the other 3, or rather, the white and black one are bad, but could see some play maybe. And then the red one is straight unplayable. I have no clue what they were thinking when they made that one. Alright, this has been The Great Revel, and thank you for tuning in, and see you next time.